All right, we are live. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us if you are on. Today's a really special session. We're talking about a problem that is a huge public health problem, in my opinion, and it's suicide and suicide awareness and how it goes. September is Suicide Month, so let's get started. I want to welcome you guys first. Get your coffees, get your waters. Let's be ready for it. Let's be ready for it. So Livyana is the first Live Better platform. We help improve your health by connecting you with your community. We bring back hope into your journey. One thing I will say is you are able to download us today on the App Store and Play Store if you are interested. Today we're talking about suicide. It's a hard topic no matter how you look at it. In this interactive discussion, please leave comments. Please leave questions. I'll bring them up as the discussion occurs. This public health problem, suicide, sees no color, sees no economic status. You can almost turn on the news any day or any week and you will find someone that has died, whether they're famous, rich, or poor. So let's explore a few facts first. Let's get into the statistics. So how big of a problem is suicide? So according to the CDC, it's the 12th leading cause of death. 12th leading cause of death in Americans. Now let's get a little bit granular. Let's get a little bit granular here now. According to NIH, it's the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14. Can you imagine that? Second leading cause of death. It's the third leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24. So we're looking at the second and third leading cause of death among our school-age kids and even into the college realms, right? That's a big problem. It's a fourth leading cause of death for people over 35 and between 35 and 44. Now, the CDC also states that one suicide death occurs every 11 minutes. So what does that translate to? So save.org translate that to 125 Americans, give or take, die by suicide every day. Every 11 minutes, 125 Americans. Wow. Wow. I'm sure some of us know people that have committed that final act, and some of us might not. So before we get started in this conversation, let's take 10 seconds to remember them. Okay. So we have two amazing guests this morning who are ready to have a deep and raw discussion on suicide, awareness, possible prevention techniques for anyone listening. Nico, I'm glad you are on this live. I'm glad you're on this live. The first guest I have is Dr. Maria Dalley. So Dr. Maria Dalley has a passion to serve others, is dedicated her life, and is the founder and CEO of EdVenture Services, a company dedicated to educational services regardless of the student. Her story is not only a show of inner strength, and I've got to know her pretty well lately, but really a true inspiration to all. Really, 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 Maria. By the age of 8, she knew she wasn't like her peers. And by the age of 10, she was diagnosed with collagen vascular disorder. At 19, she got hit with bipolar disorder. At 20, with migraines. And that list continues. That list continues. Okay? At 35, she had to choose between pain or brain, as she says. The medicine for pain to be suppressed so she could work, or working through the pain during work. So what did she do? She got creative. She created a third option, which is explore and pursue alternative pain management that allowed her to function, putting herself first and creating a life for herself that she could enjoy. There's a quote that she's told me before that I kind of liked, which was I was she quotes, and I quote her here: "I was led to believe that being successful was unattainable given my mental health disorder. But there was no way I would let someone else tell me what I was capable or not capable of doing." Very powerful. Right? Very powerful. The next guest I have is Karina Toruno-Rodriguez. Karina Toruno-Rodriguez has 16 years of experience in education with a bachelor's in psychology and currently going through her master's at the School of Education at Johns Hopkins University. Karina is a first generation Latin that strives to help others. Her passion in helping others is demonstrated through her empathy, her advocacy, and equity, and also understanding the kids that go through her classroom as a paraeducator or as a special ed educator. This passion has also led her to volunteer at the crisis hotline to support mental health disorders and save lives. So, without further ado, Maria, Karina, thank you for being on the show. You guys can learn more about them on Adventure Services. You can follow them in the bottom. And I'll put this back on towards the end. So let's get into it. Maria, you've had quite the story. You know, you've had a lot of different things that have come up in your life. Why don't you walk our audience through what you've experienced?
Well, thank you so much for letting me be here. I really appreciate the time to talk about something that is something I'm very passionate about. As you said, in part of the bio, I didn't realize how different I was. I just knew I wasn't like my peers. And then by 10, being diagnosed with a condition that at 10 I thought wouldn't really last forever. I thought it was like a cold, like it's something that just goes away. And I realized that was actually a lifelong condition that I didn't expect. And then around 11 to 13-ish, I started having different behaviors, and I definitely realized I was not like my peers. My mood swings started by 17, 18. I was like, I'm either going to be dead or in jail because my behaviors are so erratic and so unpredictable. And the suicidal ideations were there, and the stress, the hormones, everything just really kind of played into the situation, and my sleep decreased. Eventually I wasn't even sleeping. People I went to college with can attest to, some of my mood swings and how fast they can come up. I actually learned that I was bipolar taking an online quiz at the library in my college, and I was answering yes to almost every question, and I didn't even make it through before a screen popped up and said that I need to seek psychiatric assistance. So that's where bipolar began for me. And my psychiatrist was the absolute best thing ever. And from there, I learned more about, my body and my needs, and learning that it doesn't get easier, but that doesn't mean that it has to be hard either. So I later was diagnosed with ADHD and then anxiety disorder, and found out a lot of these are also connected to what the current diagnosis is hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a rare disorder. And I learned how much the body is so interconnected, and the need to know about yourself, your mind, and how you think, and then who you want to be. So I have also had somebody in my family member that had committed suicide, and I have experience with that. And fortunately, I haven't had any friends, but having a family member commit suicide is also very traumatic. So it's kind of the story there.
Yeah, and talk to us, right? So I would imagine, getting all these diagnoses, getting all these meds. Talk about that inner battle that we've discussed on the thoughts, right? I mean, Nico, I'm really happy you're on because I think Maria is someone you can really relate to here, right? Saying that, God works in crazy ways because you were having some thoughts and you saw this, and I'm very ecstatic that you're on here. So, Maria, walk the audience through, your thoughts as going through all this, right? Not only seeing that your family member did that final act, right? But also how that might have impacted you and your thoughts around that. At the same time, thoughts of everything else that goes with it.
I mean, that's a difficult question without, parsing it out into some pieces. One of the biggest things that I learned was that it isn't easy. It is absolutely terrifying to even think about the idea that you have to take a medication to control who you are and how you think and what you're doing as a person. And from somebody that takes more medications in a day than I ever wanted to in a lifetime, I can tell you that it's about knowing yourself and what is natural for you. Unfortunately, with a lot of the antidepressant medications that are prescribed, there's a reason why they don't want to give them to kids under 18, and it's because it can increase the risk of suicidal ideations and impulses. And I can attest to that, very much so. And it was being true to myself and saying, this is not a thought that I would just have. This is a thought that's clearly related to the medication. It didn't start until then, but you have to know yourself. You have to know, this is who I am. And before you even have a conversation with a mental health crisis counselor or anybody, you need to know, here's who I am. Here is what I want to do. Here are my passions. And then go, okay, well, what are my thoughts right now? What is going through my head that doesn't feel like me or that isn't me? Because that's going to guide you in your next step. When you start taking medications to treat a mental health illness, it's a betterment to you to do and get the treatment that you need. I'm telling you, I don't think I'd be here right now at all if I didn't start getting psychiatric treatment. It's hard to accept that you need treatment. I mean, it's not easy. And it does take a long time to adjust the idea that you do have to take something every day that does control you. But if you don't first know your passions and what you want, it's going to make the journey so hard, because you're not going to be able to know whether or not it's because of the medication you're taking, if it's something else going on. So you really have to learn a lot about yourself. And I can tell you that I have a different appreciation for suicide awareness, because there are lots of people that didn't think I'd be here either, or that could never see me be in a successful position or even doing things that I'm doing now. But it's because I have such a drive, and I have to maintain that and know that about myself. I think I kind of answered some of that question.
Yeah, well, I think one interesting thing that you said that was curious to me was knowing yourself before you contacting the crisis hotline, before you're contacting these psychiatric people. Karina, what are your thoughts around that? Right, you having been there, right, on the receiving end of a call. What have you seen make that difference in knowing yourself and how the crisis hotline can better help someone when they do call?
I think a main component when you're helping those that do have suicidal ideations, you have to show empathy, because a lot of the times callers are calling because they don't have anyone to go to, or they're afraid that if they do go to someone, especially if it's like a parent or a friend, they're going to be viewed differently, and they're going to be like, oh, you have issues, or oh, you're just crazy. And that response can shut down a person and not want to speak to anybody. So when I was receiving these calls and receiving these messages of, I want to kill myself, I'm having these crazy thoughts, no one understands, I am 100% just with them, present with them, with their feelings, and not disregarding them. They want to be heard. They don't want to be shut down. They that's how we can prevent suicide. And I want to say that I've been on calls where I had to call crisis help, where cops showed up to the house to prevent the person killing themselves. So when we have resources that are beyond our, mom, dad, beyond like a teacher, beyond a counselor, when we have outside resources, that is a huge help. And I think empathy and understanding is one of the main components when you're dealing with this, with suicide. And the more we break the stigma, I believe that that will save lives, because people will come forward and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah, and I know, I think that's just it, right? This is one of those topics that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And on the receiving end, a lot of people don't know how to respond. How do you respond to hearing someone that you love or someone that you care about saying, "Hey, I've had some pretty dark thoughts," and what do you do as the receiver of that? And I think like you know Eve, you're right. Showing empathy, I think, is a key in suicide prevention. Being able to, when you receive it, show that compassion, that care, that empathy towards the person, versus brushing it off, right?
Right.
But I know in our community, in the Latin community, a lot of times it doesn't want to be recognized. My wife is African, and in the African community, it's the same kind of deal. They don't want to recognize it, right? So I think that that key that you're bringing up, Karina, is spot on, right? Showing that empathy. And Maria, as you were going through your bouts, right? How did showing empathy, or the lack of showing empathy, impact you?
It's a little different for me. Having bipolar myself, it makes things a little different. So coming from my own mental health background, I can tell you that, my husband knows me so well. I mean, we've been together for 14 or 15 years now. And he knows my facial expressions. We know each other's body language. He knows that there are times I just need that hug. And there are times he's like, I can't do the hug. Go get the dogs. Go squeeze the dog. And I get that, but it's that I know that he's there, and it helps to know that not like I was very forthcoming in the very first date we had. I was like, I'm bipolar. You're going to have to be able to figure out whether or not you can deal with that. But I felt that it was something that needed to happen, have a relationship with somebody that could appreciate the fact that I can't always, like, I was not in a place yet where I could control all of my moods. That comes with maturity and time. But all I needed, even in high school, before I realized I even had bipolar, was just people around me that if I needed a hug, if I needed snuggles or whatever physical affection, not in an inappropriate way, but just something that I felt comfortable. I needed to be comfortable around other people, and they needed to be comfortable around me. So the empathy, I mean, in my services that I do with adventure services, especially, I want to know the people that I'm working with from a holistic perspective. I want to help them, and I recognize the struggles they go through. When somebody tells me about not sleeping, I'm like, oh, I already know about that. Let's have a conversation. Like, I want to make sure that they are not only heard, like Karina mentioned, but that they're not the only ones. I mean, it's not usually common for a service provider to talk so much about like their own personal journey, but I don't know how else to get through to some students because, my personal journey is mine, but they're having the same struggles I had. They're experiencing the same things. So if I can offer them strategies that will make their life easier, even if it's just for a day or one night's good rest, whatever it is, that's going to help them more than just focusing on academics at the moment when they can't focus on academics and be struggling with a mental health issue.
And then I see, Karina, that you're shaking your head here. What are your thoughts around what Maria is saying?
I'm really happy that Maria brought that up because I do believe in seeing everyone through a holistic lens. I do believe that we need to understand more of the individual's worldview to get a better understanding of where they're from, where their background is, how do they approach certain situations, how do they approach suicide, how is suicide viewed in their country where they're from, how is suicide viewed in the family, and the fact that one thing I do tell my students is if they are not okay, academics are put aside because your life is number one, regardless whether you have good grades, bad grades. If you are not mentally well, then that needs to be addressed first. Then we can go on to the academics. We can go on to the extracurricular activities. We can go on to the, to things that the students want to do. And that goes with their mental health. If you're not okay mentally, it's kind of like going to the doctor, right? For your physical health, it's the same thing. When you break an arm, what do? You go to the doctor, you get a cast. If you're having suicidal ideations, if you're struggling with suicide, what do? You go see a therapist, you go see a counselor. You try to figure out certain strategies, certain coping mechanisms that can help you overcome these obstacles. Especially at such a young age, these kids are still navigating their own being. Who am I? What am I doing here? All those questions that they're trying to figure out. And sometimes when they feel alone, they look at suicide as a way out. And we need to break that. We need to show them that no, like we are here to help you.
Yeah, and it's that that common theme, right? And not just in suicide, but in health in general, that the minute you feel alone, the minute you lose hope, the minute that you think there's nothing left, that's the most dangerous point at any point, whether it's a mental health disorder or a physical disorder, right? So it's losing that hope, right? Now, you both have mentioned strategies, right? Strategies on how to cope with these things. Karina, what are some strategies that you've seen could help someone going through ideations, from a crisis center support perspective, from an education perspective, and I want to hit that education realm because let's be honest, the second and third leading cause of death for our kids, my kids, is suicide, right?
Right.
So give the viewers, the audience, thoughts around the strategies to help that.
So one strategy I've seen that really helps, at least within my students, is um, when you feel that you need, or when you feel that you're having these thoughts, talk about it.
Mhm.
Go and see a counselor. Go and see a trusted adult. And I know it can be really hard and really difficult, especially if you don't have anyone at home. But maybe there's someone at your school that you can talk to. If you do feel that there's no one that you can talk to, then you can try to figure out certain pathways, constructive pathways. Like, okay, I'm having these thoughts. If you have animals, is a big stress reliever, and they even have emotional support dogs to assist with that. Music, art, anything that can distract you from harming yourself. I think music and art is a big, at least for me, I love music, I love art. And I know that my students, when they feel really, really low and they come to our offices, we have music, also coloring. They have the mandalas and the coloring books, and I give them those to, kind of just distract themselves from those bad thoughts and focus on something that can prevent it, or
Mhm.
try to.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
to add to what you just said, I mean, any form of self expression, getting
Right.
the thoughts kind of in a perspective that you then can control.
Yeah.
If it's through
Mm.
a visual design, I like going out in nature because I feel at peace in nature. I'm not usually on my cell phone. It doesn't go everywhere with me. I'm not on social media. I'm hard to find because I would rather just be sitting outside and enjoying nature, enjoying what is already available, what already exists in a peaceful setting. And just the
Mhm.
tranquility of being somewhere else really puts my mind in a better place. Being outside, being in the sun, making sure I'm getting vitamin D during the winter. I mean, it's so silly to see like you need vitamin D during the winter, but I'm telling you, like it really helps with the mood. And just doing something that I want to do just for me. If
Mm.
that's laying in a hammock, if that's reading a book, but suicide ideations, I mean, it's tricky because when they're medicinally induced versus when you're just having those thoughts.
Yeah.
And so knowing yourself helps to know whether or not it's a medicinal problem that is just a side effect and you need to talk with somebody about it, or if it's that, every doctor will tell you it takes a couple of weeks before the medicine starts to help, and then you have to decide, and it's a process, and there are side effects, and you play that game, you go through it, and you have to hope that there's going to be something at the other end of that. And even if there isn't, maybe that isn't the right med, but that isn't the only med. Like there are
Mhm.
alternative meds and different approaches you can take, but I can tell you from my own suicidal ideations, I recognize that I do live in chronic pain, and so when I'm not in pain, I'm like, this feels really nice. Like I like not being in pain, but then I know that I can revisit that same sense of elation of not being in pain again. That doesn't have to be the only time. I can do that again. And finding
Mm.
that place for my mind to go and be like, I am capable, I am successful. I mean, I'm not going to lie, some of my best coaching or counseling has come from a Beachbody workout program with one of the, with Autumn. Just because she's like, you can do hard things. I'm like, I can't do hard things. This is impressive. I can do that. And it's sometimes good to hear that, somebody else, even if it's exercise, it doesn't matter. You can still do hard things, even
Mhm.
if it's just in a physical movement or whatever. But I would also tell you working out is amazing for your brain. And it will definitely, just getting the movement out, it will definitely help with reducing some of those suicidal ideations, because you're moving your body and your body wants that. Kind of with COVID, we've been stuck inside, and, I can understand a rise in suicidal rates when you're stuck inside, and especially in smaller areas. You need to get back out there, and you need to get the walking in, being in nature, getting outside, doing things fun, going snowboarding, not hurting yourself doing snowboarding like I do, but, just having a good time, being around other people and finding things that are new and trying different things that'll, hopefully you can find a good balance, and reflecting on that. If this was a really great experience, write it down and be like, this is what I want to go to, and kind of create that strategy list. If my mind is here are the things I've tried, here's what's worked, I'm going to do that. That way you already have a system for yourself. So when you start going down that path, you documented it, what's going to be best for you at that time. And that's how you really start to heal and go through the process. And please contact somebody if you ever need anything beyond. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful people out there. I mean, I've known Karina for like 9 years, and I didn't even know all these things about her. And, now we've made these connections. And so there are definitely amazing people out there to communicate with that do understand and can give you that support and help you with the strategies and coping.
Let's go to the comments real quick. Marco, you're very welcome for bringing this to light. Suicide rates are very high among veterans. That's a reality, especially combat veterans. So advocacy definitely does matter at all stages. Eve, let's start talking about that minority discussion. Ethnic discussion. So Eve, says, being African, I can tell you suicide is really frowned upon. My wife being African, I fully understand that. And she goes on to say, there's still strong belief that it's either witchcraft or attention seeking or working hard, very hard to shift the mindset of people. And I think destigmatizing mental health in general in minority communities, I think is probably a lot of that groundwork right now. I think that, being integrated into the African community because my wife is West African, right? Me being Latin, right? Coming from that Latin background. Earlier, Karina, you said, know your family, know your background, know your culture, and in this side of it, from a Latin American, African perspective, culture perspective, it's very shunned upon. It's very denied. You can go to your parents and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. And the first reaction they have is, well, you shouldn't be thinking that. Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. Right. So Karina, I would love to get your thoughts, being a first generation Latin American, what are your thoughts around how can we break that stigma, right? And start those conversations, because a lot of what I've gathered, at least in speaking to you both and others, is if we can break the stigma in the home, it will go so much further in the impact. So, Karina, what are your thoughts around breaking the stigma in the home from a minority ethnic perspective?
It's very hard to when you're talking about like trying to break the stigma within the home, especially coming from different cultural backgrounds, because that's their cultural views. That's the way they were raised. So they're doing the same thing that was done to them, to their kids. So we need to break that cycle. And I think it starts with me. It starts with you. It starts with Maria. It starts with us having these courageous conversations and also educating the parents, because especially when they're coming from a different country, when I have my students coming from internationally and they're having these crazy thoughts, the parents don't understand, because in their country, they don't have resources the way we have resources here. If you go to China, they don't have substance abuse centers for rehab. They don't have mental health that we have here. So I think that one is to educate them and try to show them that there are other ways to support your child that can benefit their well-being. And if it comes to the point where my student is literally saying that they want to kill themselves, we immediately have them go to the crisis center, because we don't want to take that chance. And at times, parents can kind of be pushed back from that idea. But the one thing I do try to convey is their life is number one, and my job is to make sure that they are safe. And I think if
Mhm.
we show how much we care, if we show that empathy, and if we kind of try to level with them on that perspective, they're more receptive to it. And I think education is a main component when it comes to mental health, because in their country they don't have that. They don't have that component of mental health. So it's important that we are the teachers to help them in understanding that mental health is health. Suicide is real. I would hate for a parent to wake up one day and then find their kid commit suicide. Like that would break my heart. And I think
Mhm.
if we show them the severity of the issue, I think it'll help decrease the stigma.
And from an education background, my doctorate was actually, the emphasis of my doctorate was behavioral health. And so, a lot of the comments I'm seeing are exactly what I was learning in school, which is fantastic. I'm glad that other people are already aware of these very same issues. I will say that it would be amazing to get more minority populations involved in the counseling positions, in the psychiatric and psychology positions. I mean, it would be amazing to start getting people even involved just in seeing what that's like and seeing
Mhm.
opportunities. There's so many different career paths people can take, but you don't know all of the available ones. And if I want to help people, I learned that at a young age I wanted to teach. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach other people, and in teaching, that's my way of helping. For Karina, it's counseling, and it doesn't matter. We're still here to help.
Right.
So the idea is that if you don't know all the options of what you can do later and not get that exposure and say, oh, wow, I can help people doing this. I think getting the family involved, getting the parents to show up and seeing how holistically and within the family dynamics, we can all work together and we can
Right.
save each other and build a better, healthier family and community.
Yeah,
Right.
and there's one thing that Brianna, thank you for your comment, posted that I think is a very, very real thing. And if and whether it's Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist, whatever it is, there are certain religions, in this world that view that if you want to kill yourself or commit that suicidal act, right, is a lack of faith. And I think, the real answer to that, it goes back to what you guys both just discussed, right? In the home, right? Showing that empathy, showing that compassion, right? Understanding that you could still be a Christian, you can still be a Muslim, you can still be a Jew, you could still be, a Buddhist, and have these thoughts, because at the end of the day, you're a human being, right? And a human being has thoughts. Some thoughts are great. Make Amazon. Some thoughts are not that great, and
Right.
it's jump off a building. And I think being able to, us being able to recognize that, right, is a huge step forward. I think that, from my perspective and what I've seen just in the people that I know and things of that sort, the newer generations that are coming into play now have a much more transparent, um I would say, communication style, right? They're much more, I would, to an extent, brave, right? They're brave and they put themselves out there. I don't know if it's because of the dawn of social media, and they just put anything out there, where they've just become accustomed to any of that. Um, you know, Marco, you actually mentioned a very interesting thing, right? Should mental health be a topic in schools? Should there be a class, right?
Or a
Much
few.
like sex ed, right? There's sex ed. Should we have a mental health ed, right? To allow people to understand their behavioral consequences.
Right.
And you guys being in that educational realm, I would love to get your perspective on those aspects. What are your thoughts around implementing a mental health program into the school system. I know that it's MCPS that you guys are involved in, but at a national level, I think that's what needs to be thought about,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Especially when it comes to breaking the stigma, because if we go back to Karina's comment, breaking the stigma is starting with these discussions, right? But these discussions, if you look at the span, at least within my culture and my community, the Latin community, it's the first time it's probably ever happening, because my parents' generation totally denied it,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts around mental health programs in schools?
I want to see them. Sorry, Karina, I saw you're
No, go
both
ahead.
anxious
Go
to
ahead.
have the same
We're
conversation.
very passionate.
I can tell you that if there was somebody that actually was available that could help me understand what I was going through at 11, 12, 13, my life would be entirely different. But I can't even say that in a good way because I don't know. It didn't happen. So, however, I would really want to see people have that empathy and help see each other for who they are. First, as a human. Second, is somebody who also has their own needs and their own thoughts. Like, I think that would be the best way of bringing people together and overcoming the stigma against it, because mental health does matter. And a lot of people have, I assume everybody's on a spectrum of some sort for mental health. It's genetic for a lot of us, and everybody's kind of somewhere on a spectrum of sort. And that's just comes with human nature, and it's just what it is. And so if I knew more about it then, I absolutely believe knowledge is power. I feel like I have to know everything about everything. But for this, it's like if I had known, if somebody would have had a conversation with me instead of dismissing or saying, well, you're not depressed because you don't sleep, and nobody even mentioned mania or the idea that I could be both at the same time, like that was never even a thing. So the later the diagnosis, the more potential there was for me to have done something terrible to either myself or someone else. And I would have loved to have learned a lot more about mental health and those needs at an earlier age. And that would also be great to inspire people to enter a field in mental health. We're at a critical shortage nationwide of service providers. This is the best time and the best way that you can start getting those changes to happen. And they can happen at a young age. They can happen at 10. They can happen at 11. I think that if the kids are already, expressing that interest and, unfortunately going through with the process of committing suicide at that age, yeah, we need to have those conversations early. And we need to be able to provide that wraparound support. And if that means it happens in schools, it happens in communities, religious institutions, it doesn't matter. It needs to be happening, and it needs to happen soon, like now or yesterday.
It could be yesterday. I mean, Karina, you want to expand on those thoughts?
Yeah, Maria, I'm right there with you, 100%. I think mental health, we're long overdue. I know now, finally, after 20 plus years, MCPS has wellness centers now in schools, in all schools, I believe. I know at my school they have a wellness center where a social worker is there. They can help with mental health services, especially for those that are not insured. If a student is, hey, I'm on a wait list, I can't see a therapist for 2 months. Okay, well, you know what? We now have a place that can help these students that need that support, because it's you never know when a student is in those dark thoughts. I view it as like we have to do it now. Like, we cannot wait till tomorrow. We have to make sure they receive services. We have to make sure that they're alive tomorrow, is how I view it. Because you just never know when someone might be like, you know what, I'm done. So mental health needs to be in schools. It has to be. We have to have these courageous conversations. That's why I'm really happy that we're finally having resources put in schools. We have a social worker now. We have suicide lessons. Thank God. We never had that when I went to school. There's signs of suicide. I've done many classroom lessons on signs of suicide, which is amazing. I think it's great. At the middle school and high school level, it's definitely helped many students. Elementary might be a little tricky because they're still kids and they're still trying to figure things out and learn. But it should be talked about from the beginning of your educational career, from elementary school up until college, even after. Like, I think it's something that has to be addressed to prevent it and to break the stigma among people, among the humans. We have to break the
Sure.
stigma.
No,
I think for
no, go
sorry,
for it, Maria, please.
I think for elementary, it's instead of focusing on the idea of suicide, focusing on finding yourself, being
Yeah.
yourself, learning who you are, what you enjoy, and letting people like foster that. That way, you know, when you do get into those moments, you already know kind of your outlets. And hopefully we don't have to go down that path because you at least know more about yourself, what you enjoy, your passions, and who you are. A lot of it is the self-identity as a teenager, you know, where you fit in and where you don't. And if we can have those conversations to help people see who they are and learn about themselves at that elementary level, then the conversations will be easier going into middle school and into high school.
Yep.
So just a different perspective on the elementary.
No,
I know they are really
Oh, that's great.
you
No, I love
you
it.
mentioned something, you know, and let me get in Wendy's comment here. You know, I think this is incredible, right? Because, you know, in our discussion, we went from, you know, high school, you know, college, and Wendy, she actually uses mental health as a topic in her college English class for her students. You know, and one of the things that she has said in her comment was, you know, they actually would have loved to learn more about this in high school. And what is this, right? This is more about themselves, right? Because this is learning about you. You know, Maria, you mentioned just now about, you know, the elementary school level, right? The identity of who you are, right? Where do you fit in? Right? When I go in that lunchroom, where do I go? You know, because that lunchroom, regardless of how we really want to think about it, at least when I was going to school, it was still very divided, right? You had an identity and you went to where your identity was. Typically, when I was growing up, it was you went to your ethnicity, right? I mean, if you were Latin, you were in the Latin area. If you were, you know, white, you were in the white area. Black, you were in the black area, right? That's probably has changed drastically now, considering, you know, it's a very new generation. But I think that understanding one's identity and introducing that concept, right? You don't have to go deep into it, but introducing that concept at a young age, I think, is an incredible impact, right? And talking about impact, right? Andres, you have a very great question, which is, let's expand on the impact of influence of critical, long-lasting health issues, right? So what is that? Let's expand on the impact of chronic conditions, rare disease, right? What is that impact and relating that to suicide?
I can speak to that one.
I was going to say, Maria, go. You're all for it. You're all in.
I got this. So I can tell you that, you know, unfortunately in life, you know, time isn't always on your side. And it doesn't always favor you. So my conditions, I learned that at one point they were supposed to get better with time. And then I found out, you know, after more research, that's not the case. They get worse. So there are days that I live minute by minute. There are days I live 5 minutes at a time. There are days I'm like, wow, this is awesome. It's a whole day, and I was good this whole day. And for the critical, long lasting health issues, I can tell you, you know, there are times it's like, you know, it's tempting because I'm like, I'm gonna have to keep living with this, and it's not gonna get better. But then I look around and I go, you know, I can still help people, and until the day I can't help people, I'm not gonna stop. And it's finding that drive in yourself. There are certain conditions. I'm like, right now I have to do a double brace because I overextended my wrist and I'm super stretchy and I have injuries. And unfortunately, they take a really long time to heal. But I'm not going to ever let something like that stop me. I have to learn my boundaries, what I can do, how much I can help, what I can give of myself to serve someone else, and in what capacity. And, you know, sometimes that means that the person, like mom, you know, might be upset that I'm not doing more to help her pack or whatever it might be. But it's, you know, helping even that person understand that I'm doing the best that I can do. And as much as I may want to do more, I can't. And knowing those boundaries and parameters that you have for yourself, you know, unfortunately, a lot of conditions don't get better with age. However, I would always look into, any alternative medications. It's not that I don't rely heavily on, my psychotropic meds that I need and whatnot, but if I can find any alternative med that does not require me taking a pill, I'm all for it. I started with a pain management center and have had, tremendous success in reducing some of my back pain, which is amazing. I've had chronic back pain for 25 years. So the idea that, I'm finally finding relief, it's a long journey. And unfortunately, we have to wait for some of the science to catch up. But I'm really optimistic that there will be a day that, we can reduce and minimize some of the effects of the chronic health issues that will allow us to have a better lifestyle. One of my other businesses is in technology, and the idea there is to help put people together and connect and find ways that we can all help one another. But it's, technology has to get there to alleviate some of the conditions depending on what you have. And then medicine, research, investing in research and scientific research to make things better for people. And I do understand the lifelong issues in the suicide. That was what led to my cousin committing suicide herself. So I can appreciate all of that and what you're saying. It's a long journey, but the hope needs to be there. And it's not always easy to just hope. It's easy for me to say to keep your hope, but it's not easy. But minute by minute, 5 minutes at a time, moment by moment, I learned to live and living in the moment. I mean, as bad as my health conditions may be or get, I know that there are moments in the day that I can appreciate. And it's just taking time to stop and be like, wow, and actually smell the roses. Or, just take a minute to do something that I enjoy and just live in that moment. And I mean, I was even looking in Tai Chi just to break up the concept of my pain in my body so that I could detach from it and still function even if I am in pain. So, I mean, there's a lot of different options out there, and I would certainly look into pursuing all of them and working with what you do have until you can't keep working with what you have. And then you find another strategy and another door opens and you keep exploring and just don't give up the hope that there is something else. I did. And I was like, oh, well, I should have done this 10 years ago. Had I known that they could have felt my back, I would have known. I would have done this. And, while it took longer than I wanted it to, it happened. And I can appreciate that. And that's what matters to me. So I hope that kind of addressed your question or comment there.
No. I think it did. I think it went beyond that. In what you were saying, and it seems to keep being that common theme, right? Bringing back that hope, right? Bringing back that understanding that you are not alone, right? Bringing back that understanding that people are here to support you, right? And knowing that these resources exist, whether they're strangers or not. And as sad as it sounds, in certain communities, the stranger is what's going to save you, right? And that's just, and Karina, you're shaking your head. What are your thoughts around that?
I have so many. I mean, I think that when it comes to you want to know, like Lemuria was saying, if she was able to know her different ways that she can help her health at an earlier age, we might be having a different conversation right now. So I think it's important that we try to reach out to those that can provide help. And if we don't know something, then who can I talk to that can help me with this? And the more that we are connected, just as a community, as people, it's just we're helping each other out. And that is what I want, within my expertise. I want to be that person that, hey, if you don't know something, I can help you figure it out so you don't feel alone. And that's a main thing. When people start feeling alone, like you said, they start losing hope. When they don't feel like they have a sense of purpose, they don't feel that they belong. Like you mentioned, going to the cafeteria and trying to figure out where you sit.
Yeah.
Some kids don't sit with anyone.
Yeah.
They sit alone. And I think those actions can be diminished with support from us, from the community.
No. And one thing that I want to bring up was, and Nico, I don't know if you're still on, but I think this could help you. Maria, in some of our conversations in the past, you've talked about a concept that I thought could help a lot of people, right? And it was a concept around safeguards, right? Creating those safeguards, pretty much, I want to say the rules of the game, but making sure that you don't run off the rails, right? And I wanted to kind of expand on that, right? Expand on that concept of the creation of safeguards.
Oh, that's tricky. Um, so some of my safeguards are like when I know that I'm going in a certain direction, I know I have to pull myself out. My life is very much a roller coaster of emotions, and we just kind of live it by the moment. But I have to know what my strategies are, what my go-tos are, and then put the parameters around. There were times I was like, I can't be around a knife. I need to put all of my knives somewhere else, and I need to not think about it. I need to walk away, or I need to not go into the kitchen. And having a partner that understands that and recognizes, I'm like, I can't be around a knife right now. You're going to need to cut that for me. But it's just knowing myself and knowing that's not what I want to do. The real me, the true me, does not want to cease to exist. I want to be here because I want to help other people. So there are times I know that, when my mind is going in a different direction, I need to do something. I need to make a change. It's not easy. Working out is sometimes a challenge, and motivating yourself to get out of bed in the morning can sometimes be a really big challenge, especially if you're living in chronic pain and, arthritis is real. So I totally understand that, but it's really like what you can do step by step, minute by minute, making sure that you're keeping a safe area for yourself. And I can tell you that you can actually cut yourself with a butter knife. I didn't really believe that, or I didn't believe that was a thing, but I managed to do that, and that was an accident. But so just be careful with, what you're using and what you're around and where your thoughts are going. And I'm trying to think of some of the other safeguards I was thinking about. I mean, the communication, like for me, having the conversations with my psychiatrist and right now my counselor, I have to reflect on what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, what's been changing. And it's really, I have to know myself. And when a doctor says, oh, you don't, no, please. I definitely know myself more than anybody else in this room. So believing that you do know yourself and, really coming to terms with these different things you're dealing with. I mean, for suicide, it's, the impulses or the ideations are going to be there. For some of us, and it's unfortunate and it's annoying, but it's really making sure that you set your environment up that makes it work for you. I can tell you that I've had some not amazing work experiences and led me to make major changes in my life. And I can tell you that I would rather be happy and in an environment that I feel safe and comfortable and where I want to be, that makes it so that I can be successful and still serving other people. So sometimes you have to make drastic life changes, but they're for the better. And it is a leap of faith in a way, because we don't know the outcome when you make a change like that. When you go from a salaried position to your own business leader. I never thought I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd have a company, let alone, two in a nonprofit. That was never my intention. I just wanted to teach and help. So the idea that, you can do more than you think you can. The idea that you have to find what you can be passionate about that'll give you that drive to wake up every day. It doesn't, sometimes it's just my dogs need to go outside. I can't deal with them crying anymore. And I'm like, let me roll myself out of bed. Or it's, I need my husband to help me get out of bed, but that's okay because once I am out of bed, I know what I need to do. Or I know how I can take care of these things. But it's really about finding everything you can and learning all about yourself and what works for you. And just listening to your body. And I can tell you that it's weird because some of the pain was kind of psychosomatic. It was my brain being like, hey, you were so busted. You need to go see somebody. But it was like the pain. Some of it was just because my body was trying to tell me something was wrong, but it was hard to diagnose. You don't know who to go to. And everything in the body is so connected, like unbelievably connected in a really awesome way. But because it's all connected, it's really hard to pin down the actual source of problems, let alone figure out how to fix them. So in my opinion, I would always start at mental health first, even for some of the pain, unless it's from an injury, just because they're all connected. You can't get around it. So little perspective there.
No, and I think that perspective. I think is that perspective that would help anyone going through this, right? Um, you know, we're getting close to our time. So one thing that I wanted to do now is, get your final thoughts from both of you on this topic. I'll start with Maria, and then we can go to Karina. But what are the final thoughts? What do you really, really want to come across to the audience in this whole discussion?
I can say that we all can do so much better in helping everybody else around us. If we raise the awareness, if we break the stigma, if we have conversations like this, I don't have a problem conversing with somebody about my own conditions. I may get emotional about it because, it is something that we all have to deal with, or some deal with more than others. We all live very unique lives, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot more in common than we think we do. We are all of the human race, and I can tell you that, we can empathize with what you're going through, even if it's just something parallel and not exactly the same, but that doesn't mean that we're not still available, or that you can't find people like us. There are a lot of really good people out there that know a lot more than we give them credit for related to suicide awareness, prevention, mental health strategies. We never know what the person standing next to us knows or how they can help us. And having conversations, life changes just from one conversation. So being able to have a conversation, being okay and saying, this isn't just me. You are not the only one. You will never be the only one. We're all unique. Our stories may be all very different, but you are not the only one experiencing that same situation. As much as I say I'm unique and I have my own superpowers for my bipolar and whatnot, I'm sure other people do too. It's not just me. So there are people out there, there are organizations out there, the crisis hotline, Livyana is especially amazing right now. I never even knew of it until Karina mentioned it. There are a lot of people out there that can provide you with a lot more support than you might want to just open up to them.
Yeah, and Karina, what are your thoughts? What are your final thoughts? What do you want to come across to our audience?
I think we need to have these courageous conversations. I think that as the human race, we need to support each other. We need to connect with others in the capacity of empathy and understanding. I believe that if you find your tribe, find those people that lift you up, find those people that will create a positive in your life. Join support groups. There are so many support groups that people can join. Veteran support groups, PTSD support groups, suicide support groups for those that have either experienced suicide within their families or themselves that have those suicidal ideations. Find your tribe. And I think when you create that support group, that will definitely decrease the sense of suicide, that I want to kill myself thought. I also think that when we have these courageous conversations, it's breaking the stigma. And I think that the more that we break the stigma, it's going to be seen as more as we have to do something about this now, not tomorrow. We need to focus on the issue now. And I'm viewing it more as like the MCPS perspective, where I feel that we are going towards that route, but we have a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
And I think with these resources and with Livyana, we can really reach out to people that need that support and that can reduce the feeling of loneliness and isolation.
No, and I want to bring up one last comment, before we conclude. Andres, you actually asked a real great question. And Andres is asking, how can a counselor differentiate between something that's real with real intent versus an inexcusable, right, or a misbehavior? Karina, you being on that side of receiving those things, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, if someone tells me that they're having suicidal ideations or that they want to kill themselves, I treat it like that. I don't really think of it as like a misbehavior. I'm like, okay, you're telling me this. This is what you're telling me, and whether it's a misbehavior or not, I'm gonna treat it like you want to kill yourself, because that's not a joke to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where kids might use it more as an attention seeking approach, but what I don't care. I'm still gonna do the proper protocol and go about it the way I would go about it as if someone that wasn't attention seeking. I think that we need to first do the intake assessment, see like where their mind's at, but also I always take it 100%. You telling me this is what we're gonna do. And then
I
if
mean,
there's, go ahead.
okay. I was gonna say, like, I would treat it no different than if somebody came to me with a finger that hurt.
Yeah.
It's they're saying, this is going on, this is happening, and whether in it could be the attention seeking, but they're seeking that attention for a reason.
Right.
You know, you don't go, my finger hurts, I go to a doctor, you know, and they're gonna fix my finger. You know, I equate it to just nothing more than a wound that they're communicating that, and then we need to take that seriously.
Yep.
And I understand from working with, you know, a population with different disabilities and different mental health issues, I can understand where somebody might say, oh, you know, it's just a misbehavior or whatever. But really, there's anytime somebody makes a comment like that, or, you know, has certain injuries or whatever, I would take them seriously. I've been ignored by health professionals for a lifetime, and even family members, and I can tell you that it would have been so much more helpful if somebody just believed me. And so I would start by believing and taking it seriously. And then if it does become a behavior issue, then there could still be mental health illness behind that in ways that we can still address it.
Exactly.
And I can tell you that Adventure Services is part of what we're expanding. We're going to also be including strategies and access to information on executive functioning, which is also going to help mitigate some of the things that do lead to some of the suicidal ideations with the stress, the time management, you know, the getting things done, prioritizing, organizing, structuring your life in a way that's going to make it more positive for you. So that is going to be coming out on Adventure Services soon here.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. You know, I definitely want to thank you both for being on this live. Thank you for, you know, talking to the audience, bringing awareness to this conversation, you know, and really, you know, breaking that stigma, right, at all levels. You know, if you are experiencing thoughts, if you need help, all it's simple. It's just dial 988 on your phone, and you will get to the suicide crisis lifeline. Other than that, Maria and Karina, thank you for being on the show. Everyone have a great Saturday. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Let's continue to bring awareness to this issue. You know, this issue is not just something to talk about today. Talk about it within your families. Talk about it within your schools, within your communities. You know, if you're in that minority group where it's a stigma, it's a real stigma. Like in my community, bring it up and show them that it's not a stigma. You know, let's break that stigma at all levels. With that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you both for being part of our panel, and everyone have a great Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.